Welcome to the Mighty Emotions podcast. I'm your host, Giselle. I'm a certified emotions coach, and I teach you how to respond better to your emotions so you can feel better in your life. My mission is to show you how to work with your emotions to become more emotionally resilient. Your emotions are not designed to overpower you, they're designed to empower you. On this podcast, I share what our emotions are, how to understand them and work with them, and the tools you need to reclaim your power and get unstuck from emotional pain so you can find fulfillment in your life again. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to another episode and to a very special episode because today is the 50th episode of the Mighty Emotions podcast. I cannot believe it has been 50 episodes. It has seemingly flown by, but also simultaneously felt very, very long. It has been years. I started this podcast in 2021. So we're now in 2023. It's been a while, but here we are, 50 episodes later. If you've been with me since episode 1, thank you so much for your support and for listening and for being a part of this community. And if you have recently discovered the podcast or this is your first episode, welcome to the Mighty Emotions community, where all of your emotions are welcome, where it is okay to be human, and where we are learning to become resilient, empowered, and fulfilled individuals, right? All this work is about emotional empowerment. It's about being able to lead a fulfilling life and taking care of yourself. We want to take good care of ourselves, and that starts by understanding our emotions at its core. Today's episode, I thought to mark the occasion of it being the 50th episode, that I would share a little bit with you about what it's been like for me writing my book, which, if you've heard my other episodes, is called Outrunning Your Emotions. And the tagline is Face Your Feelings, Find Your Power, and Love Yourself. It is coming out in August 2023, and I've been working on it for several years now, but it's the time now for it to be born into the world. So I thought maybe I would just share a little bit with you if you're curious to know more about what the book is, or if you want to write a book yourself and are wondering how to navigate that and how to actually bring that to life. It's definitely possible for everyone. So I wanted to share that with you. And at the end, I thought I would share with you chapter 1 of the book and do a reading of chapter 1 of the book if that's something that interests you. You also can message me on Instagram anytime. Just DM me the word book and I will share the link to the full part 1, which is free for early readers. So if you'd like a little sneak peek, you can stay to the end, listen to chapter 1, or message me book on Instagram and I'll send you the link to read the full introduction and first 3 chapters of the book. Very excited for that. So starting with the beginning, where this was born, where the idea for this book was born, I truly believe to listen to your intuition, listen when you get an inspired idea. When I started this podcast and I started coaching people on their emotions back in 2020, I really got inspired to produce some kind of material that people could keep with them and reference, right? So I created a 31-day journal, which is now free. I'll leave the link to it below. But it is a daily reflection journal where you read a short reflection, you answer some questions. It's just to give you kind of structure to your daily check-in with yourself. And it's really, really helpful. A lot of people have found benefit from it, which I'm grateful for. So I'll leave that link below. But I created that book and published that. And I had the idea for another book as well. So I started writing that. And I actually wrote the entire thing. And then I thought, it's not right. It's not right. It's not the right time. This isn't really what I want to share. I was sharing it from the perspective of my story and my experience and sharing everything that I learned along the way. And I thought that's not really the type of book I want to put out into the world just yet. So I sat on it for a year or so. And then just in the past year, I thought, you know what? I want to create a book that is also going to be a resource, more in depth. As I was coaching people, as I was interacting with more individuals, I realized that I needed to create something that could really be a tool. You could turn to this book anytime. It would be easy to understand, practical, relatable, and it would give you not only the know-how, but the sense of security and the sense of, enoughness, because everything that I do in my work is teaching you that as a human being, you are enough, you are valuable, and that whatever happened to you in the past did not necessarily break you, right? It's really important to understand, because for a long time, I thought I was broken. I thought something was wrong with me. And it was just that I'd experienced so much pain and suffering that I hadn't been able to process. And I didn't have anyone to teach me this. And I used a bunch of different resources, but it wasn't quite what I needed. And so I wanted to create a book that could be what I needed, but also what I noticed that could really benefit my clients that I were working with. So that's kind of the direction the book takes. It's broken into 3 parts. The first part is about what your emotions are, where they come from, helping us just understand them at a basic level. The second part is how to find your power. I go into what personal power is, how to cultivate it, and each chapter breaks down one of the core emotions, how to actually go step by step by step through processing sadness, through processing anger, through processing shame. And a fun thing that I did in each chapter that my editor agrees was a good little insert there was a little fictional story at the end of each of the chapters on the core emotions to take you through this character's experience of processing her emotions and kind of make it a little bit more real. So as you're reading that, even though it's fictional, as you're reading it, you can kind of see, oh, okay, this is how it would look to actually process sadness, or this is how it would look to actually process shame, etc. So I really think that kind of ties it together, and it gives it a little story-breaking break. It's not like a academic, scientific. Again, stay till the end. I'll read through chapter 1. You'll kind of get a feel for the tone of the book, but it really is just something that's light, and I didn't want it to be heavy. None of the work that I do is heavy. It's really about empowering you and giving you that hope and optimism that you can be okay, that things will be okay, that you are safe to feel everything that you're feeling. So that was the tone of that. And then the third part is about self-love, self-care, and self-compassion, but the mighty emotions way. I for so long was trying to crack the code and understand what is self-love, what is self-care, what is self-compassion. And I would read all these different things, and there are amazing experts out there, but none of it really clicked. But when I started understanding my emotions, that's when it started to come together in a really easy to understand way, easy to remember, right? If it's easy to understand, it's easy to remember. And we still forget, which is why I wanted this book to be a reminder. You could pick it up, you can go to the chapter that you need, you can go to the section that you need, and just refresh your memory in that way. If it was just one kind of long, drawn out thing, I think it would be harder to be like, oh, which part can I reference? But I wanted it to be a tool that you could reference. So that's why I broke it down into these 3 parts. And the last part, as I mentioned, which is about self-care, self-love, and self-compassion, really ties it together, because without those 3 elements, it is hard to be resilient. It is hard to stay in your power. It is hard to overcome hardship. Even if you understand the first part, what your emotions are, and even if you have a bit of practice, the self-love, the self-care, the self-compassion piece towards the end of the book is kind of what's holding it all, ties it all together. So it really should be read throughout, but then also can be referenced, which I'm so happy with how it's turned out. And if you are thinking of writing a book, I just want you to know that I didn't sit and meticulously design every single thing about it. Like I said, I had written a totally different book, and I had listened to my intuition when it told me this isn't the way that I want it to come into the world. I fully believe that the book writes itself, that I'm just the vehicle to deliver the message. And that's why it took years, right? I wanted to give it time. I didn't want to rush it. I didn't want to force it. And it flowed through me in such an aligned way as I deepened my understanding and awareness of our emotions, as I did more work on myself. And when I say work on myself, I just mean I had different experiences. I had to go deeper levels with each emotion, but it wasn't, grueling, exhausting work. It was such beautiful work, which is why I was able to capture it in the book in this way. And hopefully help you see that our emotions aren't these awful things. Even when they're uncomfortable, they're these beautiful things, that beautiful assets that we have, beautiful experiences we get to have. So I wanted to give myself time to develop as well in order to capture that in this book. In the introduction, I share about my story, but I didn't want the book to be about my story. I just share that in the intro so that you can get that kind of context and you can understand that who I am today is so different from where I started, and that this has been a journey for me, learnings and continuous practice and application and continuously tweaking so that it could be simple enough for me to apply in my life and simple enough to remember. Like I said, if you've ever tried to tell someone what you're feeling, then you know that it's not the easiest thing to translate into words. So it needed time to come through. And any book that you're writing, if you feel called to write a book, give it time to come through. Sit with it, walk with it, ponder it, meditate on it. Let it kind of come to you. The way the book has flowed out of me has been so beautiful. Even chapter 11 ended up being the chapter on alignment, and initially I wasn't thinking about a chapter on alignment, but taking each one step at a time, having the titles come to me, having the layout, the outline of it come to me, going in with a rough idea of what I want to create, but not being tied to that, knowing that what needed to be birthed into the world is going to be birthed into the world, and the people that need to receive it are going to receive it, and the way that I explain it is going to be in a way that they can receive it and it can resonate, which I hope is what I do on this podcast as well. So that's kind of my advice. If you are interested in writing a book or you feel called to write a book, is to just write it, write it, but collaborate with that inspiration that comes from somewhere deep within you, and give it time. If it doesn't feel quite right, don't rush it. And I really am super proud of this book. It's something that when I reread it, I'm like, this is what I needed. And when my editor reads it and gives me feedback, like, this was so enjoyable to edit and to read, it brings me so much joy. So I hope that you also find it enjoyable when it comes out in August of 2023. It's called Outrunning Your Emotions, Face Your Feelings, Find Your Power, and Love Yourself. If any of these things is something that you've struggled with in the past or that you find yourself struggling with now, this book is really going to give you this deeper awareness, deeper understanding, but also this deeper sense of peace that you're not broken, that it is okay, that you are where you need to be, and that you do have this beautiful future ahead of you. And you can create an amazing, fulfilling life when you know how to work with your emotions and how to take care of yourself. And so now, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to be reading chapter 1 of my book, Outrunning Your Emotions. If you are not interested, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can skip to the end. If you want to read more of the part 1, it's actually available for free. Just send me the word book via DM on Instagram, and I'll be able to send you the link for that, right? It's a private link, but I wanted anyone who is really curious, wanted to know more about my story, wanted to know more about what the book is going to be like. Chapter 1, 2, and 3 are all available to read for free. Just send me the word book on DM. But let's dive into chapter 1 of my book, Outrunning Your Emotions. Chapter 1, Emotionally Underdeveloped. Emotional immaturity is a hallmark of our current society. People would rather talk about politics and race relations than be vulnerable about what they feel. The demand for emotional support far outweighs the supply. The World Health Organization states that in the past decade, up until 2017, mental health conditions and substance use disorders have seen a 13% increase. It doesn't come as a surprise that many people were completely unprepared for what happened in 2020. More and more adults and children are being diagnosed with anxiety disorders. A scientific study found that despite there being many intervention strategies today, anxiety and depressive disorders remain a leading cause of burden globally. People everywhere are struggling emotionally and not getting the support they need. For all the talk of mental health in our pop culture, we rarely address emotions, even though the definition of mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. How did we get so lost? We are all born with emotions. Our first cry is a critical moment in the delivery room. For medical professionals, it's a sign that you're able to breathe on your own. For you, the infant, it's a sign of the displeasure of no longer being in the safe, nourishing womb of your mother. It is an expression of grief, fear, and disgust. We may be different in many ways, but all of us have the same core emotions. They are with us from the moment we are born until the moment we die. Our emotions are our most primal instincts. Even sociopaths have emotions. I truly believe our world would be a better place if we understood this. Even the experts are confused. A simple Google search for what is an emotion is going to give you many conflicting responses. Author Brené Brown opens up in her book Atlas of the Heart by acknowledging how vast the research is about emotions. In it, she states that this is due to emotions being studied from various angles, i.e. medically, psychologically, philosophically, etc. Experts can't even agree on the number of emotions we have. The research ranges anywhere from 7 to 27 and beyond. The general consensus is that there are 7 core emotions corresponding to 7 universal facial expressions. Even still, experts can't agree on what the 7 core emotions are. Some say guilt is a core emotion, while others say contempt is one. Regardless of what experts consider an emotion or not, they all agree that developing emotional intelligence is important. Where development begins. As human beings, we need certain conditions in order to develop and mature. In the right environments with all our needs satisfied, we don't just survive, we thrive. To prosper is our birthright. All of us deserve lives where we have what we need to flourish. If not, we can't develop the necessary life skills to self-regulate and process our emotions fully. These basic life skills are needed to help us navigate challenging moments. Without them, our mental and physical well-being suffers. Learning about early childhood development taught me a lot about how emotional development works. Healthy development in children is defined as being able to grow up having their social, emotional, and educational needs met. When children have their needs deprived, they are shown to have long-term impacts that include depression, reduced self-control, and poor resilience. Do you know any adults who suffer from depression, reduced self-control, and poor resilience? I know at least one who did for years. Me. When I began my recovery journey, I was extremely emotionally fragile. I threw more tantrums than a toddler. I was triggered and offended by seemingly everything. I was isolated. I went through cycles of depression. Everyday life was extremely challenging for me mentally. I was barely functioning. My emotions were completely out of control, and I had no clue what to do about it. I couldn't understand why I struggled so much while it seemed so easy for other people. They seemed to hold it together. I thought holding it together and being stoic, i.e. seemingly unaffected emotionally, was a sign of maturity. I didn't know that my emotions were normal in response to what I was experiencing. I thought I only felt the way I felt because of my traumatic childhood. I thought that my brain was broken. It left me feeling powerless. Ignorance leads to immaturity. Emotional maturity is a person's inability to express or cope with emotions that are serious in nature. People who are emotionally immature may also overreact to situations or have trouble controlling their emotions. This was certainly true in my case. When I experienced intense emotions, they would completely consume me and seem to last for weeks at a time. Research suggests that we become emotionally immature when we have a difficult childhood and parts of our brain are left underdeveloped. It is proven that a difficult childhood leaves us with a smaller hippocampus, the part of our brain mainly associated with memory. This doesn't mean that we can't later develop it with the right education and support. Emotional maturation is not restricted by our physiology. The development of skills such as self-regulation and critical thinking can still happen later in life. After all, the brain is a muscle. We develop it by stimulating it with the right information and thinking critically, taking action, and repeatedly iterating. Acquiring and developing any skill requires the right knowledge and instruction of how to effectively apply said knowledge. The first step is learning what your emotions are. Then you learn how to respond and practice doing so until it's second nature. This builds your mental dexterity over time. The more we develop our ability to process our emotions, the more our brains develop. Most intervention strategies are short-sighted and focused on teaching people to develop coping skills, i.e., how to get from one moment to the next. We need to be helping people develop understanding, getting to the root cause so that they can find resolution. This is exactly why I created the Mighty Emotions method. When I first began using this method in my daily life, it would take me days to fully process an emotion. Now, thanks to the years of daily application I can recover from intense feelings in under an hour at times. In fact, I rarely ever have intense emotions or depressive episodes because I've gotten so good at listening to my emotions, even when they are just a whisper. If we learn to address them early on, it saves us a lot of suffering. I observe my clients develop their emotion management skills as well. When we first start working together, it takes them some time to really feel comfortable with the practice. However, week after week of taking small but mighty actions, when faced with challenges in their lives, leads to positive, powerful shifts. Months later, they find themselves more resilient than they initially would have believed possible. Do we outgrow our emotions? Most emotion coaches work with children. Yes, an emotion coach is a real title. I didn't make it up. I choose to work with adults because they need the most help. Age alone does not affect our emotional development, but expectations change as we age. For some reason, after a certain age, we're expected to no longer require emotional support from others. We're supposed to be completely self-sufficient unless there's an obvious reason that would grant you accommodation, even if we weren't taught how. This leaves us with no choice but to pretend that everything is fine, lest we be ostracized. There seems to be all this criteria for what makes it okay for someone to struggle emotionally. You did not need to experience extreme conditions like I did to end up emotionally underdeveloped. Many people who had seemingly quote-unquote normal childhoods do not develop healthy emotion management skills. Why? Because they weren't given the support they needed. Often they were left on their own to make sense of what they felt, or their emotions were dismissed or belittled. I know many people who were not physically abused, but they were neglected. They spent a lot of time on their own. They were bullied. They were shamed and judged when they had an emotional outburst. Some people grew up in extremely strict conditions as children. They were only accepted if they suppressed how they really felt and behaved a certain way. Anything outside of that was shunned or they were punished. Not everyone grew up in homes where they could ask for what they needed. Not everyone grew up in homes where they saw and experienced healthy emotional responses. Not every child has emotionally mature parents. We do not stop having emotional reactions to life, and our emotions are never going to go away. We deserve to continue to get support as well as get trained on how to process our emotions. Getting to know our emotions. When I realized that nothing I did got rid of my emotions, I started asking different questions. Up until that point, I had been asking questions like, why did they treat me that way? What do I need to do to feel better? And most commonly, what's wrong with me? These questions did not serve my emotional development. I remained depressed and emotionally fragile. Revisiting the past over and over kept me thinking in circles and feeling worse about myself. I saw professionals and was given tools to reframe things. I was given methods to help me cope. All I wanted was to make my uncomfortable emotions disappear permanently. I wanted to outgrow my emotions. This led me to study the work of American psychologist Paul Ekman, who identified that there are 7 core emotions which evolved to help us survive daily life. We also have complex or compound emotions that are combined elements of our primary emotions. These are the emotions that have helped me the most as I have healed from the past and learned to navigate life. These are the emotions that I help my clients learn to trust. They are sadness, anger, guilt, shame, fear, disgust, and alignment. You may be thinking, what about resentment, disappointment, or anxiety? Studying positive psychology, which is the study of what makes life worth living, helped me understand that in addition to emotions, we also have feelings and moods. Feelings and emotions are not the same things. The nuances between emotions, feelings, and moods are important to understand. Emotions are our primal instincts. They are the signals our body sends to us to let us know when our needs aren't being met, i.e. sadness. Feelings are the way we describe our experiences. They are our impressions of what we are experiencing. They are created with our thoughts, i.e. disappointment. Moods are temporary states that we create using external sources, i.e. being in a low, demotivated mood. A great tool which illustrates how emotions and feelings are different is the emotions and feelings wheel. In the middle of the wheel are the core emotions, and as you move further from the center, there are different feelings related to each core emotion. For example, anger would be in the center, while annoyance or frustration would be in the wider circle. This is a tool originally created by American psychologist Dr. Robert Plutchik. Today, you can find many online by doing a simple Google search. I also have a free video breaking down how to use this tool to identify what you're feeling in my free resources section at mightyemotions.com. The definition of an emotion is an instinctive or intuitive feeling as distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. Our emotions are biological instincts, but my experience teaches me that they are more than that. Our emotions are not just tools for survival, they are tools to help us thrive. All those years of surviving were the most miserable years of my life. Numbing my emotions for a decade with drugs and alcohol didn't prevent me from surviving either. I was completely disconnected from my intuition, but I was surviving. Our survival doesn't depend on whether all our needs are met, but our happiness does. Let's use an example of 2 plants. One of the plants is in a pot that is too small for its roots to grow. It's not getting adequate sunlight. No one remembers to water it consistently, and it's often neglected. Now think about a plant on a lush plant wall. This plant is getting adequate light and water, it is connected to other plants, and is admired every day. The first plant described is surviving. The plant on the wall is flourishing. Of these 2 plants, which do you think is going to grow well? I know the answer seems obvious when we use the example of plants, but it's a good illustration of what growth requires. Just like plants, we have certain core needs if we want to grow. Plants have needs for sunlight, water, certain nutrients, etc. We have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs that help us get through life, and whether or not these needs are met will determine which emotions we feel most strongly. A buildup of unprocessed emotions means a buildup of unmet needs. This is why it's so important that we learn to feel. How do we begin to feel? Have you ever heard the expression, you need to feel in order to heal? This is 100% the case, but most of us settle for relief instead of true healing. I didn't think I had another option. In my own life, I spent years wanting to control my emotions. I did not know I could trust them because I had never let myself truly experience them. We don't trust things that are unfamiliar. To our minds, uncertainty equals danger. It doesn't help that we are taught to mistrust what we feel. In fact, it's highly encouraged. We learn that some emotions are good and acceptable while others are bad and shameful. This leads us to chase certain emotions and reject others. We falsely believe we can experience some without experiencing others. The problem is that rejecting or avoiding our emotions doesn't eliminate them. What we believe about our emotions determines how we respond to them. In order to heal, we have to be willing to unlearn. The more I opened myself up to seeing my emotions in a new way, the easier it became to feel them, no matter how challenging. Some of our emotions are comforting and some are uncomfortable. Positive psychology highlights the benefits of both the pleasant and unpleasant emotional experiences. When we are able to accept, embrace, and exploit both our positive and our negative emotions, we give ourselves the best chance to live a balanced, meaningful life. I didn't feel like my life was meaningful when I was spending all my time pushing my emotions away instead of approaching them with curiosity, focused on relief instead of true healing. Healing is not just about getting temporary relief, it is about being restored to a state of wholeness, a state of optimal well-being. When we haven't processed our emotions, we live in a fragmented way. Trauma, here defined as a buildup of unprocessed emotions over time, disconnects our minds from our bodies. My clients often come to me after having spent so much time living in their minds and not knowing how to feel their emotions. True healing helps us integrate our whole selves. Accepting and embracing all of my emotions has been the key to my healing and my resilience. Allowing myself to have the full range of emotional experiences has led me to living a more fulfilling life. Every time I surrender to the uncomfortable emotions, I open myself up to the experience of pleasurable feelings and emotions as well. On the other side of sadness, shame, guilt, anger, fear, and disgust was alignment. I use alignment as a catch-all for the positive feelings of love, gratitude, and joy. Life started to have more meaning. I felt more connected to myself. My relationships got better. I was able to set boundaries easily. I trusted myself, and my self-esteem improved. I no longer had severe social anxiety or depressive episodes on a regular basis. I felt free. Free to be authentically myself. Free to make decisions that were good for me. Free to try new things and safe to do so. I've watched as my clients learning to feel has allowed them to heal from their past as well. One of my male clients came to me because he struggled with suppressing his emotions since the death of his mother. He had never fully grieved it. Every time I saw him, he would be wearing black and be really closed off. After a month of working through the Mighty Emotions method with me, he started showing up on our calls wearing color and being playful. It was like talking to a new person. He told me he hadn't been playful in his life since he was a kid. We began processing the grief and shame he held about the death of his mother, and he began trusting those emotions. Weeks later, he told me how for the first time ever, he had a vulnerable conversation with his father where they shared how they felt about it. It brought them closer together. He began to feel better about himself and started getting noticed at work. This led to him getting promoted to manager. He used the Mighty Emotions method to work through the fear and self-doubt that came up with this promotion. One day, he sent me a long message telling me that he had freedom from work anxiety. He had come out of a situation in which he previously would have felt low self-worth, and only after did he realize how confidently he had handled himself. He cried tears of gratitude for that moment, all because he had been willing to take the small but mighty action to rebuild his relationship with his emotions. Building a healthy relationship with our emotions is like building any healthy relationship. When you first meet someone, you don't yet feel safe with them. The more you have good experience with them, the more at ease you feel with them. Most of us panic when we experience our emotions because we are emotionally underdeveloped. Fortunately, we are not doomed. We can and should learn to embrace and work with our emotions. Emotion management is a necessary life skill. Emotion management is not about controlling our emotions, it is about being intentional with how we respond to them. You experience emotions every day. They are unavoidable parts of being alive. When you know how to manage your emotions to become an inner compass that is always guiding you and signaling when you're out of alignment with your optimal well-being. Not paying attention to them or doing our best to avoid them causes internal and external chaos. Now that we understand what they are, let's look at how we experience them. Thank you for listening to this excerpt of Chapter 1 of my book, Outrunning Your Emotions. Learn to face your feelings, find your power, and love yourself. Coming August 2023. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean so much if you could subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends and family, and let me know what you think by going to my Instagram at mighty_emotions and connecting with me and letting me know what you loved about today's episode. It really means a lot that you support this podcast, and I love coming to you each week with a new episode. So be sure to subscribe, let me know what you think, and take care of yourself.